course, the Browning name was almost synonymous with handguns for the first part of the 20th century, but Browning never really had a good double-action pistol all its own. That's where the BDA comes in.
About 1975, an engineer in Switzerland, Edward Brodbeck, came up with a design for the economic manufacture of a new 9mm pistol. It was known in Switzerland as the P220. The Swiss government didn't want to export arms of war, so SIG went out and bought a German gun company called J.P. Sauer & Son, and the Swiss tooled it up to make these P220 style pistols.
This is a double-action pistol. It can fire with a long sweep of the trigger pull, which both cocks the hammer and releases it to fire, or it can be fired in single action. In 45 ACP, it had a 7-round, single-column detachable box magazine. And the interesting thing about the BDA is it still had the heel-mounted magazine release of the early SIG Sauer P220s. And SIG had a process for manufacturing these slides where they'd have a block, and then they'd have sheet metal sides folded over. And it was a very efficient system, and it makes for a very, very nice gun.
Swiss did succeed in selling military versions to Japan in caliber 9mm and a few other countries. But for the U.S. commercial market, they made a deal with Browning Arms Corporation to market the gun under Browning's name.
So of course, Browning is one of the most famous names in pistols. That name gets its reputation starting in 1899 with the FN 1899 pistol designed by John Moses Browning. But there have been plenty of Browning pistols not designed by John Moses Browning, and one of them is the Browning BDA. And the BDA that was imported from 1977 to 1980 is interesting in that it's a 45 ACP. That's not a caliber Browning is known for. And the guns were also offered in 9mm, about 2,700 of them, and a lesser number of 38 Supers. But the majority of the guns imported were in 45 ACP.
J.P. Sauer, who was making these guns, developed the process of polishing, of directionless polishing, of almost optical quality, to polish the sides of the slide. And if you look at one, you cannot see any polish marks. It's as though you're looking at an optical lens. And it's extremely flat. There are no rounded edges anywhere. If it has a shortcoming, it's that it and the other SIG pistols are not easily detail stripped in the slide or in the frame either. It's a bench operation to take the firing pin out of one of them. But on the other hand, they seldom need to be removed.
There was another BDA, just to confuse people. In 1977, you have the SIG Sauer produced gun wearing the Browning name being imported into Morgan, Utah. And then you also had a 380, it's a BDA 380. And that gun was made for Browning by Beretta. It's essentially a Beretta Model 86 that wears the Browning name.
The reliability of the gun left nothing to be desired. It was very solidly functional. The trigger pull was like a target pistol out of the box. They worked beautifully. Good endurance. It passed every endurance test that was ever subjected to. And yet, Browning, for one reason or another, never really had great commercial success with it. And they eventually just discontinued the gun, in which case it later it devolved through another importer out west, and then ultimately was brought to Interarms in Alexandria, Virginia, but not as the Browning BDA, of course, but as the SIG P220. And by then, the very expensive optical polishing of the slide had disappeared, but the underlying gun, being very superb, was something more of a success than Browning had with it.
The Browning BDA guns are not easy to find, but when you do find them, typically they have about as nice a blue job as you are ever going to find. Anyhow, that's all the time that we have for this week. If you like the show and you're not an NRA member, you need to join right now. For more information or to sign up, go to AmericanRifleman.org. I'm Mark Keefe, and I'll see you right here on American Rifleman Television.